We're going to call our meeting to order. This is the recessed meeting for the Nags Head Board of Commissioners, and it's Wednesday, September the 19th. Our first item tonight is the adoption of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously. Our next item this evening is audience response. This is the time that we set aside for the audience to come and speak. If you'll give us your name and your address, we'll listen to any public comment that's out there. Who would like to be first? Anyone? Anyone at all? We do have a request from Commissioner Cahoon, and I'm going to make a motion to excuse her so she can make her comments as an individual. May I have a second on that?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Renee Cahoon, and I live at 7213 South Virginia Dare Trail in Nags Head. And I'm here to address the board this evening about events, special events, of which we have many wonderful ones. We've got an East Coast Surfing Championship going on now down by Jeanette's Pier, and they're doing a great job. They're having good attendance. The people that organize it are so professional. They inform everybody. They're out in the community, and it's wonderful. What I'm here to talk about tonight are events that I see on the horizon precipitating some sort of conflicts. There was another event going on at Jeanette's Pier today, supposedly at Jeanette's Pier, that really wasn't at Jeanette's Pier, and thankfully it was not. I can honestly say it was not in front of my property, so it's something that I had a complaint about, and I'm here to talk about my observation. And it was an event that was, crowd gathering permit was for Jeanette's Pier. They ended up being several lots north of Jeanette's Pier in front of some rental cottages. They had tents all out on the beach from advertising several different vendors. And while this was a quieter time of year, there were still people in the houses. There were people that were trying to enjoy the beach or at least relax by their pools. And it was a constant day of bullhorns and megaphones. And that creates a conflict, I think, within the community. Had this been the summertime, I think the conflict would have been even greater with the beach being crowded and those type of tents. But as a person that lives in the community and as a business person that is aware of our zoning regulations, what my comments tonight are going to be is about signage on the beach and what is the answer to commercialization on the beach. If you've got tents out on the beach advertising 4 or 5 different vendors for an event, that same person that may have a motel right up the street from that cannot put out cabanas with their name on those, because that would be considered commercialization on the beach. And my concern is, are we having a double standard by allowing events to have special treatment versus businesses that are there all the time that are paying taxes within the town to not have that type of signage in? And I'm not one that wants commercialization on the beach, but those are questions that are being asked in our community. They're being asked of me as a person, as a business person. But my reason for coming tonight is to talk about people that get crowd gathering permits that don't stay within the parameters of where they're supposed to be, and there doesn't seem to be any communication that's going to adjoining property owners or property owners in general in the area about special events that are being held. And again, I want to reiterate, I'm not talking about the East Coast Surfing Championships. Those people have been marvelous to deal with. I've never met a group that took greater care to come into a community, to communicate, to leave phone numbers, to talk about what they were doing, and to give contact people if there were any issues. They haven't. So thank you for your time this evening.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Just a second shot at that. With that, we're going to close public comment. Our next item is Chief Zork, recognition, and a recognition of a very special event.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor, Board of Commissioners, Mr. Manager. I'd like to ask Fire Captain Wolf, firefighters Zad, firefighter Dillon, and Chaplain Rick Lawrenson up to the podium, please. Just arrange by height, please. It is a privilege to stand before you tonight with pride and recognize the heroism, compassion, and excellent medical skills of our fire department staff. Usually, many hours of fire crew activity is focused on prevention and preparedness, ultimately readying personnel and equipment for upcoming responses. On August 29, 2012, the fire crew at Nags Head Fire Station 21 was alerted to an emergency by a citizen banging on the door and requesting help. A tragedy was unfolding several doors down from the firehouse. An 8-month-old infant had been pulled from the bottom of a pool and was not breathing. The Engine 21 crew, consisting of Captain Phil Wolf, firefighter Evan Zad, and firefighter Anthony Dillon, rushed to the house, and frantic family members directed them to the pool area. Firefighter Zad was met by the father of the child, who was holding his son and performing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation with no results. Firefighter Zad took the baby from the father, and the fire crew did a rapid medical assessment of the boy. He was not breathing. He was unresponsive, limp, and blue. Acting quickly, Firefighter Zad initiated back blows to clear the young man's airway, and soon water was expelled, and he began to sporadically breathe. Even though he was moving some air, his condition was still very serious. He was placed on his side and given oxygen to help with his labored respirations. The infant was now crying, coughing, and spitting up water. And as each second passed, his condition improved. To all in attendance that day, listening to that crying baby was the sweetest sound we could ever have wished for. Firefighters continued care of the boy until Dare County EMS transported to Outer Banks Hospital. Fire Chaplain Rick Lawrenson faithfully responded and rendered some much-needed emotional aid to the relatives and to the rescuers. Rick remained with the family for several difficult hours until it was determined that the child suffered no detrimental effects and was released from the facility, and it was quite a relief. Thankfully, a disaster was avoided, and this story has a happy ending. His mother relates that the baby is back to his normal self, unaffected from the experience and ready to start walking any day. The parents of this fortunate young man are most thankful for the professionalism and care delivered to their son and want everyone to know that the Nags Head Department of Public Safety holds a special place in their hearts. We are proud of you all, gentlemen. Please stand and be recognized now by the Nags Head Board of Commissioners. If you would go on out.
Y'all come forward. I have a number of certificates, gentlemen. It's great that when your preparation and those years of being prepared, getting ready for something like this to happen, to be there and be able to make that big of a difference in a family's life it must make you feel really good. On August 29th, 2012, Nags Head Fire Rescue Chaplain Rick Lawrenson responded to a serious emergency involving a non-breathing infant found submerged in a residential pool. The Town of Nags Head Board of Commissioners honors Fire Chaplain Rick Lawrenson. You have contributed unselfishly in service to the citizens of the town. Your prompt and compassionate delivery of spiritual support is hereby recognized. Further, as Fire Department Chaplain, you make a lasting positive impact, thereby supporting the town's goal of creating a safe and livable community. Thank you for your devotion to duty, vigilance, and a job well done. On August 29th, 2012, while on duty at Fire Station 21, Nags Head Fire Rescue personnel responded to a serious emergency involving a non-breathing infant found submerged in a residential pool. The Town of Nags Head Board of Commissioners honors Fire Captain Phil Wolf. You have contributed unselfishly in service to the citizens of the town. Your excellent delivery of medical skills, prompt decision-making, and compassionate performance are hereby recognized. Further, you have made a lasting, significant, positive impact and saved a life, thereby supporting the town's goal of creating a safe and livable community. Thank you for your devotion to duty, vigilance, and a job well done. Congratulations, sir. On August 29th, 2012, while on duty at Fire Station 21, Nags Head Fire Rescue personnel responded to a serious emergency involving a non-breathing infant found submerged in a residential pool. The Town of Nags Head Board of Commissioners honors firefighter Evan Zad. You have contributed unselfishly in service to the citizens of the town. Your excellent delivery of medical skills, prompt decision-making, and compassionate performance are hereby recognized. Further, you have made a lasting, significant, positive impact and saved a life, thereby supporting the town's goal of creating a safe and livable community. Thank you for your devotion to duty, vigilance, and a job well done. On August 29th, 2012, while on duty at Fire Station 21, Nags Head Fire Rescue personnel responded to a serious emergency involving a non-breathing infant found submerged in a residential pool. The Town of Nags Head Board of Commissioners honors firefighter Anthony Dillon. You have contributed unselfishly in service to the citizens of the town. Your excellent delivery of medical skills, prompt decision-making, and compassionate performance are hereby recognized. Further, you have made a lasting, significant, positive impact and saved a life, thereby supporting the town's goal of creating a safe and livable community. Thank you for your devotion to duty, vigilance, and a job well done. Thank you very much, sir. You'll represent us well. I know everybody would like to shake your hand, though. Well done, sir.
Thank you.
Well done, sir. It's always nice to have a positive story. That's a great ending to what a lot of training and preparation. This is what they prepare for. Our next item is number E. It's consideration of proposed town board committee policy. And Commissioner Walters, Commissioner Coon, y'all are the committee. Do you want to lead us through it?
Attached for the board's consideration is a town board and committee policy. Commissioner Walters, Planning Board Chairman Edwards, and I met once at the town library and then once via short conference call just to clarify a couple questions. And I hope the board's had a chance to look at it. This is not, while this is a way for the board to evaluate candidates, and we would like to have lots of candidates for boards, but it's just some general guidelines to go by. While this may be something in writing that will establish a policy, speaking for myself, I still realize there'll be a certain amount of subjectivity involved based on how well you know candidates and so forth, because there's always a personal touch involved when we do select members for our different boards and committees. But this is just general guidelines. It does speak briefly to diversity. As you see from the sheet, it has categories on it, whether you're retired, a business person, what section of town you live in. And it also talks to wanting to have representation from different parts of the town based on the applicants that we have. Well, again, I realize that we may not always have applicants that truly represent every community or every neighborhood in our town. This kind of will give us some guidelines to go by in making those board appointments. So turned over to Commissioner Walters to let her add.
This also establishes, some procedures for us when we look at appointments or reappointments, and also evaluating committees that we currently have or committees we may want to establish in the future. It provides us some guidelines to evaluate, do we really need a committee? Or is the committee functioning at the same level that we needed it perhaps years ago? So it lays out some guidelines for us and an appointment process, and some guidelines for perhaps length served and those kind of things within the policy. So just offer that for comment and.
Open it up for comments. I've got some notes myself, but
Well, after Commissioner Walters went over the form with me, the form is very daunting, but then I understand that we're going to continue to use our regular application form. At staff then will take the information the applicant has placed on his application and put it in on this form, which will give us a better understanding of the applicant and all of the different things that he has to offer the town. My one question was, I noticed that the terms of all of the boards, when they're staggered, then they go into a 4-year term. Did you all come to any conclusion about what we have now, which is a no length of term served? Did that enter your discussion at all?
I'll speak to that. Yes, the thought process was that obviously this board doesn't have term limits, and we did not feel comfortable, or I did not feel comfortable saying that other boards should have term limits. There are people that sometimes ask not to be reappointed. There are people that ask to be reappointed, and that would be for this board to decide upon. But we did not feel comfortable saying 2 terms is enough, because there are people that contribute valuable input over a period of years, and maybe we want to reappoint them. So we did not feel comfortable.
I didn't see that in any of the notes, and that's why I wanted to just make sure that you had or had not discussed that. So you did, and that was your conclusion. Okay, good. Thank you.
Doug? Okay, I had a bunch of comments. I'm sorry. One thing I did go back and look at was a rules of procedure notebook. Now, this is probably dated. It's like early 90s.
Did you get the dust off of it before you read it?
Yeah, I kicked it around a little bit. But one of the things that it did mention was that under Rule 31 in this one, it said the presiding officer or the board. So it gave some, and I think I've done some appointing on ad hoc committees. I don't think that's appropriate to do for like the planning board or anything like that, but I think there is probably some room for ad hoc committees to be appointed by the presiding officer. For duties on the planning board, we had, it's item number 2, duties, which I think is page number 2. But planning board provides recommendations to governing board re-site plan and town code reviews. I guess I would like to see that broadened a little bit. I think our planning board does a good job at looking ahead and giving us some long-term planning ideas. And I'd like to see that continued. And so maybe just adding a little bit broader scope to their duties. 3D, membership. No nominee to the committee or any members of the nominee's immediate family shall be currently employed by the town unless the committee position is designated as such. I guess the thing that I'm cautious about on these is restricting ourselves. I could see somebody that was a parent to a lifeguard. The immediate family member is an employee of the town, but they may very well want to serve on a committee, and I don't want something to stop them on that. Now, y'all do have something in here that we can make exceptions all the way through, so I understand that covers it a little bit. E, party to litigation. No nominee may currently be a party to, nor a legal representative in litigation against the town. What were y'all thinking on that?
Well,
Yeah.
this.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Susie. You're fine.
Because
You know-
everybody seems like they said, everybody sued us at least once.
Well, actually, we got the Board Builder series book from the School of Government, and basically took that document and kind of reworked it, to suit our needs. So that was in there, and we did not disagree with that.
We went through each item, and it was kind of the consensus that we didn't want to create adversarial relationships to start out with. That we wanted open-minded, and if somebody applied for a board and you're in a litigious situation, it wouldn't start out necessarily harmoniously.
I understand what you're saying. I guess I also look at the group that we're in court with over, like the price of the easement and that kind of thing. And I wouldn't want to exclude those folks from serving on some other board. I don't know that they're always mutually exclusive, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, doesn't this mean, Bob, that it's active? I mean, lawsuits get settled, and so this would not eliminate, as I read it, it would not eliminate the ability for someone who has been in past litigation with the town to become a member of a committee. And that's how I read it. Now, am I incorrect, Counselor?
That's what it sounds like to me.
Sounds like to me. So it may deter some lawsuits against the town if people are interested in serving boards that may not want to sue the town. But also, when they finish suing the town, win or lose, they can still be on the board. So if I'm right, I'm kind of comfortable with that statement.
The appointment 30 days prior was another item that kind of piqued my interest a little bit. And I guess we're putting that in there as a requirement that somebody would have to have their application in 30 days before.
Which one are you on right now?
That was under terms, I believe, y'all.
Yeah, that was not in here. I too had a problem with that, and I'll tell you why when you finish.
Staggering those terms, I think staggering terms is a good idea, but I'm not sure how we'd accomplish that on some of these committees.
Well, the ones that we already have, they're already staggered.
Right.
Creating new ones, if you wanted to create new committees, you'd start out with X number of people, and someone would start out with 2-year terms, some with 3-year terms, some 4-year terms.
So more like a standing committee?
If you
Yes.
created new standing committees,
Okay.
new ones, that you anticipated being around for a long time.
Probably not a short-term ad hoc,
Right.
Okay.
single purpose.
That makes sense.
And we did that with the art committee. It was staggered when we created that.
It's a great idea to have continuity, to have a history.
Kept everybody from leaving at one time or turning over it, you know.
Removal, under removal, where was it?
That was on page 4.
Thank you, I've got to go down one. And I was looking at B where it says the town governing board may remove any member of, well, this says the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Well,
I thought I'd read that actually in general,
it is in general,
a general committee.
yeah.
And then it goes on to say, for neglect of duty, non-participation, or other just cause, I would suggest you just put a period after committee on that one. Because I think this board probably does retain the power to remove them, whether it's just cause or not. But I'm throwing these out for discussion, y'all. It's not.
Can we comment as you go? Well, we left the non-participation in there, because there needs to be a commitment if you're going to serve on a committee.
To come to
You need to be-
meetings?
Yeah, you need to attend the meetings. So,
Fair enough.
so we felt like some criteria as far as, the percentage of meetings you attend. I mean, of course, there's always, there can also always be extenuating circumstances, but we have the ability to.
And that's a requirement that's actually been put in on other boards at the state level, that the governor, if you're a governor's appointee and you don't attend 75% of the meetings, you're gone. And that was an example, that's just an example, and there are other boards that have attendance requirements that some enforce them, some don't, but it's there. But it does imply a commitment, and everybody should be aware of that before they accept an appointment.
I know the Tourism Board has an absentee policy as well. I think all the boards I've sat on, and whether they enforce them or not is another thing, and I think it leaves you the leverage to be able to have excused absences versus just not showing up.
Chair and vice chair must have served 1 year. I can see some cases where you might not have that choice. And the confidentiality piece on, now I don't know where they came from. I understand a little bit better on the School of Government. There was an attorney involved in writing these, I'll guarantee it.
That's why it's so clear.
That's why it's so long. We talked about confidentiality. I think, and it really specifically talked about personnel matters. I think really the only committee that's going to come into play on is personnel grievance, or I guess there's an employee.
Honorariums.
Honorariums. Okay.
There are boards that make honorarium recommendations.
Yeah.
Well, there's also, there's one place where this could arise in the situation where the board decides to appoint a litigation committee. In the event that you had litigation of some sort that you wanted to have a committee involved in managing, you'd of course want that committee to maintain confidential information. So that's not one of the standing committees that's listed here, but the way this is currently written, I think it applies to any committee, not just those standing committees that are already listed.
It just seemed an odd juxtaposition to me to have the confidentiality piece and then the piece about open meetings right underneath of it. And like I said, I think certainly there are things that need to be remain confidential, but I think most committee business is probably open
It is.
all the way through.
Yeah. And would you feel more comfortable if it said something about statutory requirements or?
Sure.
Well, it does say personnel matters, and we all know that personnel matters are not out there for the general public. And then it says of a sensitive or confidential nature. I think we all know what is sensitive and confidential. That again, you just don't put out there for the 5 o'clock hour. I don't, have we ever had anyone to question having to sign a confidentiality agreement?
Do we require a confidentiality agreement?
You don't, I think
No,
we did on something, on the person.
Personnel committee.
I
did.
knew
Personnel,
I'd
okay.
signed something long ago. Okay. Well,
And I understand the personnel piece of it.
Yeah.
That's an essential piece. I think that there's very little that the Citizens Advisory Committee does that's not open to the public, except for honorariums, as you said.
This is a broad brush stroke that applies to any committee, so it doesn't specifically name each one because of the fact that it would be limiting if you decided to create new committees. But this is done with a broad brush, not a specific to each one. And where appropriate, you would sign it. Where appropriate, you would not.
What I looked at this in context with was also 6G, I guess it is, and that was all recommendations and reports of the board committee shall be conveyed exclusively to the town governing board for action. Does that exclusively mean you can't talk about it anywhere else? That was what I was trying to avoid, I guess, was,
give us an example of something.
We can lose the word exclusively if you'd like.
sorry, I had
It's just a procedural thing, I think.
Well, and it said neither the board, committee, nor any member thereof shall release any written or oral report of any board activity to any individual or body other than the town governing board or the office of the town manager.
Are you,
Where are you now?
where are you? You're,
I'm on 12, limitation of powers, number 2.
you've skipped down from,
I skipped a couple of pages.
You
probably.
skipped
Go back
way
to the
down.
one you were talking about first?
The one you were talking about is up further up.
The confidentiality piece?
No. Under meetings,
Under 6G.
6G
Okay.
was where we were, and that basically says,
The exclusively, I think, was the question there. When I read the exclusively there, and then kind of you can't talk about anything on the board or committee, those two together just kind
Well,
of
how about if we just delete the word exclusively?
That-
Does that work?
suit me.
and I think part of that may have come about, not speaking for this board, but it may have come about for some of the template, is that stuff was being out before board members saw it. And that was the one thing that I recognized, is the fact that the board members don't want to be surprised by recommendations that are coming forward without knowing it. You kind of want to see, it's kind of like planning board minutes, you kind of want to see what's going on before you read about it.
I don't want to be surprised, but I don't want to have the impression that I'm gagging anybody either. That's
I have no problem with
where I was.
deleting that.
So delete the word exclusively.
And then that next one, the last one that I had, I know y'all are glad to hear the last one, limitation of powers, and it was that release written or oral report of any board activity.
And which one is that?
That's 12.3.
Now, wait a minute. 12.3 doesn't say that.
12.2, I think, maybe.
I beg your pardon. 12.2, release any written or oral report of any board. I mean, to me, that sounds like you can't talk about it to,
If you
To
take the
anybody.
word exclusively out, this has to go out, because you can, if you so elect to talk to your neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, you can drop it.
that was all of my
Want to
comments, yeah.
delete that one? Number 2?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Okay.
I'm not everybody, I know, y'all.
Well, this, like Renee said, it's a broad brush. We had to start somewhere, and so we're here to get everybody's comments and incorporate those.
We don't take it personally. We brought it back for all the board to make comments.
Well, at least you know I read it.
The 30 days, if I can comment on that, we do have not well, there have been times when we've had a broad spectrum and many applications. As time has, as the economy, I think, has played a little bit of role in this, some people have gotten second jobs, or they become really busy with the inner workings of the family versus going out and having the free time really to devote to committees and the responsibilities and the time that they involve. I'm not so sure that requesting that someone be on the list 30 days prior to board appointments, unless we do something that we don't do, and that is each month say, in 2 months, we are going to be reappointing planning board members or Board of Adjustment members. So please, if you are interested at all, get your membership in, get your application in 30 days prior, because these appointments come very quickly on us. I mean, from 1 month to the next, they're on our agenda, and I think, oh, we have that many? And you don't really have that many to consider. So we need to, if we're going to do a mandatory 30 days, we need to do due diligence and say to the public, in 60 days, guys, we're going to have vacancies or possible vacancies on these committees. So if the board wants to take that responsibility, I'm fine with the 30 days. If we're not going to do that, then I don't think we should put a time frame, because again, what you girls have tried to do is to bring us a more informed form of the applicant versus what we normally see. So, that said, it's enough.
Well, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I think that perhaps this would alleviate a situation where, you know, you think you have all the applicants, we've received the board packet, we know what's going on, and then, oh, there's one more applicant, or, you know, on the day of, or, so we probably need some cutoff, even 15 days, or something, so that it's reasonable for, you know, the process to take place. You know, that the staff has time to get the information to us, and, you know, that it can't be, let's say, an afterthought for someone. You know, if you're involved in the chances are we have applications on file anyway. People, you know, are interested in serving when there's an opportunity versus an afterthought of, oh, there's a vacancy, I think I might want to do that. So there will be another opportunity.
Well, I hear two things there. One is us doing a better job of letting people know that there are vacancies out there.
Yeah.
But also having some time before. I'm comfortable with 15 days if
I'm
y'all-
comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable, and I liked your, Commissioner Sadler's suggestion about making sure we put out there, and I know we have, Carolyn does a good job of getting out the word out, but maybe an announcement in here on next month's agenda, we will be considering these numbers of vacancies.
Upcoming
Put it on the
Upcoming.
website, in the e-blast.
At least if we're going to cut it off 15 days, we should give them 30 days' notice that, you know, next month we'll have vacancies on these boards. If you're interested, do it.
Right.
You know, I think that would work a lot better than what we've been doing.
Do y'all want to revise or include those comments in and bring it back? for
Yeah, would you
next
like to
time?
make a motion to include all the comments?
Sure.
Okay.
And I move that we include all the comments.
Do we need a motion, or
I think y'all are fine, just reviewing it.
just incorporate everyone's comments?
Incorporate it and bring it back.
Do we need to bring it back again, or
Or
can
can
we just
we-
go ahead and act on it with all those comments?
We probably ought to see it in writing
Okay.
altogether first.
Okay.
So at the next board meeting, that'd be all right?
Well, before you end this discussion, are there any appointments coming up anytime soon? I think there are some
Very
vacancies.
timely.
Yeah.
Like 3.
Yes.
On the CAC? So anyone interested on being on the CAC needs to get an application in ASAP? Good, thanks, Carolyn.
And we'll try and make a point of doing that
Yeah, I
on a
think
more
it's
regular
great.
basis. It
Yeah.
really is important. Other comments, questions, y'all? Okay. Next item is number F, violations to town beach driving permit regulations. Mr. Lighty.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, Board. At the last meeting, there was a little bit of discussion about looking at stiffening the penalties for unauthorized driving on the beach, and really this, to me, takes two different issues. One deals with people who do not properly get a permit to drive on the beach, and then secondly, those who might have a permit but then do not comply with that permit and do things beyond what the permit allows. The town does have the authority to regulate beach driving, of course, as provided by statute. The board can make driving on the beach without a valid permit a Class 3 misdemeanor, punishable by up to a $500 fine, but in order to do that, the board must specifically state what that penalty would be in the Code of Ordinances. Right now, what the board has is a generalized statement of penalties. and that is not sufficient. In order to treat it as this severe a penalty, it must be specified that the fine can exceed $50 and in fact what the maximum fine could be. Similarly, the board also has the authority to regulate the manner in which vehicles are operated on the beach. In other words, regulating improper operation with the same kind of penalty. Again, at the present time, the board only provides a criminal penalty for that as an infraction. And the board can regulate that in the same fashion we just described a minute ago by providing a more severe penalty. So the simple thing to do is for the board to amend Code Section 1-6 to provide that violations of whichever type of violation you want, whether it's driving without a valid permit, whether it's some type of unsafe or improper operation, you have specific code sections that apply to those things. You just need to specify them, and then specify that it shall be a misdemeanor, punishable by a fine of up to $500. You would need to make corresponding changes to the other sections of the code, particularly sections 1-6B2 and D2, to remove the references that they have about there being either civil penalties or generalized criminal penalties. And then the final thing I wanted to point out was just that we had some discussion about this a few months ago, talking about criminal penalties, but generally speaking, any type of criminal penalty is something that accrues to the benefit of the Board of Education, just so there's no one thinking out here that the board's trying to raise revenue of some sort by these increased penalties. It's all about trying to ensure compliance. So it's up to the board to decide what you want to do, but you have those options.
Okay, we discussed the not having a permit issue last time. I don't think we talked as much about improper driving, but same issue, really.
Yeah, driving on the dunes, driving too fast, driving in an unsafe manner, all those things. They're not real, I mean, again, I think that's in some ways just as serious, and it makes a lot of sense to treat it just as serious a violation and to have the same kind of penalty.
We did talk briefly last time, talked about if you were charged with doing that, not being able to get a permit for X number, you couldn't keep one with your permit. Your permit would be revoked, and you couldn't get one maybe the next year or something that we talked about. I'm not so sure $500 may not be a little stiff, but what we have now is hardly.
It's too easy.
It's too easy. I mean, I'd look at something for a couple $100 or $250, something like that. 500 just seems a little stiff to me.
Well, it does say punishable by fine of up to 500, so who would have the discretion upon,
We have to set that.
but I know, but it says up to 500. I mean, so if we change that and make it up to 500, do we have to be specific?
No, the court would decide what that punishment would be.
Oh, the court would say,
Would impose a
okay.
fine of up to $500.
Okay.
But if you wanted to say that for a first offense, the fine shall not exceed $100, you could do that, and the offense, and again, going to court, the court would only be able to impose up to that type of penalty. So you can stair-step it just like that if you wanted to. That would give you more control on, because, as it is right now, it's up to what a judge is going to decide to do.
Right.
Right now, the way it works, it's a $50 fine.
Right, and that's it.
And that's all it is, and it's an infraction. It is not a misdemeanor. And that's something that someone that gets cited, they can go to the magistrate and just pay it off in advance of actually going to court.
Okay. I guess this might be a police question. Kevin, I understand that, reckless, driving on the dunes and other things. What are we doing about, we probably haven't had any, but what about speeding? I think there is a speed limit for the beach. And so if somebody's like going 10 miles over that, would that fall into this? Or would it fall into exceeding the speed limit like we do on the road?
They can be charged. It's just like a public vehicle area when that beach is open for access to driving. You have to have a permit to be out there, but the same rules of the road apply. If someone's operating in a careless and reckless manner, someone's operating in the vehicle while under the influence of alcohol or drugs, they can still be charged with those offenses. So as far as adding additional offenses to allow us to do that, we can already do that now. Quite frankly, speeding is not a big problem out on the beach. We're out there, quite a bit, and even during the fishing tournaments when it's a lot of traffic, they You do have your isolated problems, but overall, it's not that big. And I provided the manager with some information regarding the number of violations that we have found in the last 3 years, I believe I provided it.
Okay, thank you.
So board consensus, a not to exceed $200 on a first, not having a permit? First offense of not having a permit?
Well, it should be more than $50 because,
It's
like you say,
$50 or just
you
roulette?
can roll the dice, so you may get caught or may not, so you may not buy.
But 200 is enough to,
That would make me,
you think twice.
as I do, buy a permit, but that would make me buy, definitely make me buy the permit.
That works for me. I mean,
But do you say, and do you, then do you go on and say, in further offenses, your ability to drive may be revoked for a year or more? I mean, we did talk about that. So do you change, if we decide, do you change that in the same ordinance?
Yes, ma'am.
So what's appropriate? No permit for 2 years if you get caught a second time with no permit? That's
I mean, there can be,
Not unreasonable.
you said there could be a stepped approach, right? So,
Mhm.
So the first time, if you're driving without a permit, it's a $200 fine. The second time, it's no permit for 2 years?
Well, since the clerk's office is issuing the permits, you know, are they gonna go to the police department, go downstairs to the police department every time somebody applies?
It should be something on the,
There's more to this than what meets the eye here. I mean, there is, I mean, it's not that I don't disagree with it.
They
I
might
mean,
might be
the,
falsified.
the need is there, but what an individual, if an individual gets stopped or cited for something that might be what Anna's talking about, you know, the ability to suspend them from getting another permit next year, that can fall through the cracks very easily. I was just asking the manager and having the police chief come back up here a second, I would appreciate it. Kevin? Kevin, we're still issuing civil citations and state citations, correct?
Right now, it's civil citations on the beach, which is a fine of $50. I
But
think
you could issue a state citation on the beach.
you can do that, yes,
Careless and reckless, that kind of stuff. instead of-
correct. And that fine would be punishable in district court as a misdemeanor, and the punishment is determined by the minimum and maximum set by the court system, and the judge has that discretion.
Right, okay. Because, again, the crime, the punishment doesn't always fit the crime on this type of issue, so. And I don't want us to look like the attorney said, that we're trying to drum up fines for the coffers of the town. However, you know, I was under the impression that the civil citation end of it, moving it up to our ability to the citation being a fine up to $500, it's not a mandatory court appearance. Right? Unless they're out of state,
A town code violation written on a state ticket.
is
it's-
mandatory.
Well, it's mandatory, meaning that we can't set the fine. It goes to the, you have to go to the magistrate to do it. And then the magistrate can set the fine, or you can appear in district court.
Okay, and the other thing is, it's the same as moving violation. You have to, or it's the same as it's also the same as a ticket for a dog or something like that. You have to appear before the magistrate in order to settle this thing. If you want to pay the ticket, if you want to pay it, you have to go before a magistrate to do that.
That's correct.
You can't just send it in.
No, sir. And unless it was a violation of a motor vehicle code, which would be a state violation.
Again, that's getting back to the thing about the state citation versus a civil citation.
Well, there's a third thing. The town can criminalize these things itself. What the chief is talking about, what y'all are talking about, are things that are already criminalized by state statute, basically operational types of things. You have the authority to regulate driving in a different manner. No driving on at night, no driving on the dunes, things that go beyond the regular rules of the road that are governed by state statute. The town can regulate those things and criminalize that as Class 3 misdemeanors, just like the other types of penalties would be
And put those on state citations and issue them that way.
Well, it would be a town-issued citation. It'd be a town citation, because it's being issued only by virtue of a town ordinance, just like any other violation of just a town ordinance, as compared to a generalized criminal violation. So like a noise ordinance violation or a leash law violation, those types of things, the town has the authority to set specific required conduct and the penalties for them.
Okay, I mean, I have absolutely no problem with it whatsoever. It's just our ability to be able to find these individuals, if in fact that happens. I'm not saying it would, but somehow or another, if a citation is written the following year, come time for a permit again, we need to have a list of citations maybe that were written or whatever, which makes it difficult.
Well, I think if you're working on it, like, we could provide to the town clerk or to the town and then be distributed to who sells our permits, people who received citations or violations last year. If you're on that list, they're not, to be issued a permit if the board so chose to do that. We can easily provide a list of the people that were charged or have been charged last year.
Okay, that answers my question.
Well, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we fill out an application when we come every year to get
You
the
do.
beach. And on that application, it should say, have you had has your license been revoked? Have you had a violation for driving on the beach? And if you say no, and you do happen to give Carolyn that list, and you're on there, that's somebody that you don't want driving on the beach.
Right.
But I mean, I don't think that people are going to come for an application if they've been, if they've been removed, if they've paid $200. I just don't think they will, but it should be on that application.
I think we could look
If we go this route.
at y'all's direction, we can certainly look at the application with town administration and make some adjustments to that application where it would require some other answers.
And that would help Doug's concern.
And I'm going to suggest that we just keep it simple for now and just make it a $200 violation. And then if we need to step into revocation, I think we can do that. But I think the $200 is probably going to be significant enough that,
Well, here's the other issue, what I was thinking of, what's court cost now, Chief?
$170, $80?
$170.
How much is
For
it?
district court?
Yeah,
170?
something like that. It's more, it used to be 50, then it was
Yeah.
60, then it was 80, then it was 110. I mean, it just,
So it's 170 plus.
like attorney's fees.
Yeah. What happened to the no cheap shot?
So that's $300 for a $50 permit.
That's the whole point.
That's the whole point.
That's an expensive lesson. I think most smart people who have driver's license would only do it once. You're probably right. We probably don't need step 2.
well, to me, just thinking through it a little bit, the benefit to having and I didn't include it because I hadn't really thought about it, to be honest with you, but this discussion is spurring it on. The ineligibility for a permit for a period of time, what that means is you end up making yourself automatically subject to this higher fine if you're driving on the beach again, and court costs. So, I mean, the penalties are there. So I kind of like the idea of not just the fine, because if it's just the fine, every single year I drive without a permit, if I'm the only person doing it, you may not make it regulation, but I'm only going to be fined $200 each time it happens, and I can do it every single year. Yeah, sure, I should just go get a $50 permit, I
Right.
realize that, but my point is, it seems to me that there should be more of a penalty for doing it than,
Just paying the money and keep on driving.
Well, looking at our records, it's not a big deal anyway. We're talking at next to nothing as far as people that have violated, so there was only 3 last year.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Well, do we have consensus on the 200?
I think we do. I'd say we keep it simple, but we can always add further
If you mean
penalties
200 is
we have a
keeping it simple, that's fine, I don't care.
problem. Well, it's simpler than trying to keep track of who's.
State citation, that's almost $400.
Yeah.
yeah.
Y'all want to,
I'll make a motion that we change Code Section 1-6 to say violations of Chapter 8 sections and all of those shall be a misdemeanor and are punishable by a fine of up to $200. And then we make the corresponding change to Code Section 1-6B2 and 1-6D2 to remove references to the sections of Chapter 8 that would be subject to the stiffer penalties. Is that right?
I got you.
And-
We
Yeah,
have a motion
that's my
on the floor.
motion.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Further discussion?
And I think that should we find that Kevin's out there too busy doing this, and that we're going to be having repeat offenders, then we might take another look at this and say, those folks that lost it, if you lose it again, you've lost it for a lengthier time.
Are we okay with the corresponding changes, John? Do those need to be in writing in front of us, or?
I think you can do it just this way.
Okay.
I think the clerk's got the motion, and I think you can just make these changes to those code sections.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously.
Beach driving opens up October 1. I hope Carolyn gets busy.
Feels like fall already. Item number G, items referred to in presentations from the town attorney.
Let's see, the thing that I have to discuss there will be these potential property donation issues. I think at the last meeting, Mr. Ogburn talked a little bit about a proposal for the town to receive some, I think initially it was 3 different properties, and now it's down to 2, but these are properties owned by George Moore and wife in one instance, and by George Moore and wife and Mr. Neal, George Neal, and his wife Phyllis Neal. The property owned by Moore only is located on Nansemond Street at 9701J, East Nansemond. The other property is located at 119 East Proteus. And we've done the title work on these. I think the board's initial and primary concern dealt with what potential monetary obligations would the town be taking on by accepting these properties. We've determined that with respect to both of these 2 properties, that there are recorded covenants requiring the owners to share in the maintenance and repair costs for the access easement that would serve these properties. So for the town to accept this property, it would be bound by those obligations. In addition to that, there's a potential tax lien on one of the owners that there's a good argument that it doesn't attach to the property because it's only in the name of one of the owners, but there's a potential that the state could come in and try to assert that lien against even a subsequent property owner. And so our recommendation is that if the town were to accept these properties, that it should obtain title insurance for these to protect it, particularly from that eventuality. So I think the bottom line is where the town to accept these 2 properties, there would be the prospect that the town would have to come off the hip for some money in the future, perhaps on an annual basis and maybe for an amount down the road that it didn't want to spend.
My question is, what has the current owner been paying as far as the upkeep of the roads? Did you find that out?
Don't know that.
Okay.
Do not know that.
I
that
think
number.
everyone is assessed pretty much along a private street the same amount of money when it's or those that I've dealt with in the past, usually it's divvied up equally
Yeah.
among them.
It would be equal, whatever that amount is.
Yeah, I would be curious to know that. And also, aren't these properties valued on the tax books like $1,500 or $1,700, something like
I
that?
thought one or more was a washout, but I'm not, maybe Cliff knows.
I believe there's only value on one of these 2 properties.
One of them.
But you're right about the other, it's about $1,500.
And so, what would title insurance cost on something that was valued at $1,500, even if you could get it? Well,
If it's going to cost us money, I don't want them.
I'm not willing to support this. I had the questions the last time about what we would be becoming liable for. I thank the attorney for finding out more information, but while I appreciate the offer of the donation, I would vote no.
Well, I'd like to ask Cliff, though, before we vote no, what benefits do you see the town deriving from these properties?
Before Cliff answers that, let me also mention one more thing which may help him a little bit because I'm not sure what he's thinking of, but the obvious to me may be a problem too. The covenants for both of these properties also provide that the easement, that the access rights are to benefit only the lot owners and not the general public. Now, query what that means when a public entity actually owns the property, but I think the intent of this is it is not to be used as a type of access for the general public, so that probably would not be an intended use if the town were to accept the properties. Beyond that, Mr. Augmiron may have some creative ideas on how to use the properties.
The cons outweigh the pros.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. We would have to see what the cons are. We haven't been shown what the cons are. There might not be, again, we've talked about this several times, and what we need to do is have some information before we make this decision. So I would recommend that we go back and find out exactly what it is going to cost us, if it's going to cost us anything.
But I think you've got the potential for cost, whether it's cost, I don't know that anybody's maintained that road. I mean,
I don't know that anybody's collected the
percent.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one thing. As again, what the attorney said is that maintaining the right-of-way or whatever is for the owner of the property. That's us. Or would be if we took it over and we took it over. So there's no cost there. There's not going to be there will be no property there. I mean, there will be no structures there or anything like that.
What I heard him say was that we'd still be responsible for maintaining our share of that private street.
That's
because
correct.
That's the access.
Well, everybody in that subdivision has to pay their share for that private street. Again, I'm not so sure that they've even collected money on doing that.
The benefits that I originally saw were the ability to have additional staging areas in future nourishment projects, and also to take off of future development hotspots or properties that we've obviously had issues with in regards to nuisances. It eliminates that in the future.
And see, that's where I'm getting, I know that it will take a long time and perhaps a reverse of the erosion, but at some point, when none of us are sitting here, that land could become buildable. And this would first of all, it belongs to the town, so I would assume that it would become very valuable, an oceanfront lot or two, or whatever. I don't think that the cost of the road, and that's why I would like to know what those other owners in there have paid over the last 10 years to maintain the road. I think that we may be doing this too quickly. Staging, another thing for future beach nourishment. I mean, we have perfect place there, so.
You'd only be able to stage
Well-
for that particular area. You wouldn't be able to use it as a staging for other people, because that would be a violation of the covenants.
But let's just see what it's going to cost us before we make the decision, that's all.
No, how would it be? If the town owned that piece of property, they could use it for staging?
Read the covenants. It says that would only be used, that access could only be used for the convenience.
I'm talking about from coming up the beach, that piece would be.
Without using the access road itself, just coming in from the beach
Right,
itself.
that's what I'm thinking of, is coming in from the beach, you'd be
Well,
able to.
The manager's comment about staging implies putting equipment there or storage of pipes there for beach nourishment.
Correct.
And
You could
that
put
would be
anything
used-
on your land if you came up from the beach to stage, I would think.
That's correct, but I think what she's saying is if it's going to be used as staging, she assumes that means you're bringing it in off the road, which
No,
would
I
not
was
be
not.
permissible.
Well, I don't think you can get there off the road.
Yeah, it's
I
pretty
doubt it.
narrow, I think.
So I hear us asking either the manager or the attorney to go back and find out how much they've had
Yeah,
to
I
pay
mean,
in the
because I
past.
agree with Renee, if it's going to cost, or with everybody else, if it's going to cost us, no. but let's find out what it's gonna cost us, you know, because I'm not so sure what they paid in the upkeep on those. I mean, I've heard stories that nobody's even collected the money on.
But just because they haven't collected in the past, doesn't mean that it won't need to be
I
collected in the
understand
future.
They may be looking at deep pockets of
I
the new
understand
owners.
and I understand that too, yeah.
That's why
But
you're
just
invited
remember,
to the
the
party.
town will only be one owner.
I know, but they're looking at people that they know that they're gonna can assess. If
And I'd also like to know what if you can get
Insurance.
title insurance.
And a quote for that.
Yes.
So cost to maintain the road and cost of title insurance. Anything else on that one?
No, sir.
Anything else to report?
No, sir.
No?
Nothing else to report either.
Mr. Manager?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'd like to take the opportunity to brief the board and bring you up to speed and up to date on the progress that we've made in regards to addressing some of the stormwater issues throughout town, and update you from the presentation that I gave to you on September the 5th. Town engineer David Ryan is here, who he and I have become pretty close in the last 2 weeks, working on these projects, exchanging emails at midnight some nights, and I appreciate the work and the patience that he's provided both me and the town and the citizens of our town in trying to remedy some of these solutions. So thank you, David, very much, and I'm going to ask him to come up here in a minute and get a little bit more in-depth and detailed in some of these issues. I've kind of now broken these projects out. I gave you 24 projects back on the 5th, and I've broken these out into, as you'll see, potential town projects. Those are projects that I think that we can work exclusively on. These are projects that I think are within our ability to address immediately. Culvert replacement between Nags Head Realty and Dirty Dicks, issues in Nags Head Pond, issues in Nags Head Acres and Vista Colony, which have kind of become lumped together as one project. North Ridge, Old Nags Head Place, Soundside Road, South Ridge, Seven Sisters, Dune Ridge, and then the old ditch that I referenced back from the Ash Wednesday storm that ran between properties on Memorial and Wrightsville to sheet some of that water off. Private-public project, and I'll get to this again. This is the project that the board approved on private property that would take an easement from the town for the private properties to be able to pump water from sump pump on their property underneath the street out into existing ditch. What we're proposing is that that David would come up with the standard for this. The private property owner would pay for the construction. David would make sure that it's installed to the town specification and to the standard that he draws up. He's been in communication with some of these property owners almost immediately after the last meeting to explain to them the process we're going through. But I felt it was important that we come up with the blueprint so that hopefully other private property owners will take advantages of this exact same model, and they build it the same way, and they're consistent, and we get what we need and what we're comfortable with. The next is waiting on DWQ review of our projects that have caused some concern, that have state stormwater permits. We have asked and they have agreed to inspect the 10.5 shops, Nags Head Elementary School and the Outer Banks Hospital to make sure that their sites are still compliant with the original requirements and standards in which they were approved. I'm not sure if I mentioned this last time, but the 10.5 shops have not been inspected since the State Employees Credit Union was completed. So I don't know if that makes a difference, but it may. They recognize that, and they're coming back to inspect all 3 of those, hopefully sooner than later. Okay, next. These are projects for completion with DOT and/or the Park Service cooperation. We received from the DOT has been very helpful and is moving along in trying to make some progress. They provided us with some maps going back to a few days after the Ash Wednesday storm. And these are aerial photos that show, again, I think it was within a week of when the storm occurred, and you can see where some of the overwash occurred. And I'm going to need some help with somebody that can look at a picture of South Nags Head in 1962 and give me a point of reference. But from these maps, and they have 1974 and so forth and so on, we'll be able to overlay to match up the ditches as they were maybe 40 years ago, and be able to return those ditches to that original condition. The right-of-way swells that are affecting several of the stormwater issues in the west side neighborhoods, Blue Jay to Hollowell. DOT again has committed to, if we'll go in and clean up the vegetation selectively, they'll come in and widen those swells and deepen them and clean those out. They're going to do that over the winter. We know the project that David's working on now with the multi-use path is going to also address a couple of issues, and so that's still in the works and will be remedied. And those are the swells there, and the culvert at Villa Dunes and Wood Hill. They're going to have to be adjusted to match the rest of the flow in that right of way. We'll continue. We don't have much to update with the flooding that's occurred at Willow Junction, and that was primarily during Burl. I don't know that it's been as much of an issue since then, but that was an event again that I'm not sure we'll ever have stormwater measures in place to capture that amount of rain in that period of time. And I think I've just hit on those east-west, the east to west ditches. The east to west ditches will help the residents on the west side of 1243, which are more permanent residents. I want the permanent folks to know that this isn't all about one sector of our population or the other. This is about our town as a whole. The issues are spread throughout town, and I place as equal importance on east side versus the west side. They're full year-round versus visitors. And then the Red Drum Ocean Outfall. DOT yesterday and today ran some cameras through some of the outfalls. The Red Drum Outfalls was open. There was some sand in that, but it was open. The most southern outfall probably had more sand in it than the others did, but it's functioning. And when it gets enough head pressure, it will blow out. That one doesn't give us nearly the amount of trouble that the Red Drum Ocean Outfall does. So they're in the process. I mean, getting those cameras in those ditches is very helpful. Also on the causeway, getting closer to the bridge, there's a ditch that runs under the road there. They've gone through and have found a trash bag that Alan Russell told me he hadn't figured out how he's going to get it out, but he promised me he would. So they are working with us. They are doing what they can to recognize the impediments in our systems to get a remedy. So I've been very encouraged by that. And then other projects, the other two that didn't really fit anywhere else in all these other categories, Public Works has gone and dug out some ditches and swales on the backside of PetSmart around that retention pond there that is almost back to 2 ponds now. That has helped. And then the area between Wrightsville and Memorial and the Gallery Row area, that's an area that I think will be positively affected when we can get the culvert between Nags Head Realty and Dirty Dicks cleaned out, and then also getting that Red Drum outfall extended.
You mentioned the DWQ permits on 10.5 and the elementary school. Is there one for, I guess, Satterfield Landing for that development, the PetSmart's in?
There is.
There's a high-density permit that was issued for that, and the town's got a copy of that.
Okay, we'll put that in that same review category while they're here doing those others.
Because to me, that's the most obvious problem it seems like we've got of those several. Anyway.
And the other thing that that David's kind of working on to help to equal things out is that we've got, the three major outfalls being the one at Red Drum, the one at Conk, and the one at Curlew. And as he's looking at all this, he's looking at how he might be able to tie that network of outfalls together so that we can, once one maybe becomes overloaded, it can divert water to another so that we don't have 70% of our water going out of one and then a much smaller percent going out of the other two. And he's looking at that, tying those systems together to get those to operate more effectively. Okay, you can skip that one. Okay. These are proposals that David has submitted to us thus far. This is the engineering design and surveying for the culvert replacement. And let me back up. We have in the budget $200,000 that we have set aside for stormwater projects. Initially, $150,000 of that was earmarked for I'll call it Phase 2 of the Vista Colony and Nags Head Acres project. So there's money presently in the budget to fund the engineering design and surveying and putting these projects together. And I can continue, if the board is agreeable to the process we're going and the projects that we're trying to bite off here. But at some point, if we want to spend money to address the construction for these projects, it's going to take additional funds that aren't currently budgeted. So I can continue on with the funds that are presently budgeted. Anyway, the engineering, design, and surveying for that culvert replacement at $2,200, and then a possible construction cost, which is David's educated guess, very educated guess. The pipe, the dewatering, all the components that he's put together at $30,000 to remedy that. Next.
And what does that pipe do? What does that culvert do?
It takes water from Nags Head Pond. It goes underneath the bypass, and then it takes water into the Gallery Row area, into that ditch, and then it conveys that water from Nags Head Pond, and that's its function. And then you can see areas where that pipe is, it's 30 years old, 25, 30 years old. It's starting to deteriorate. There's areas that on the bypass now, there's a sinkhole forming. You'll see it you can feel it when you ride over it. When you get back in between those two businesses, you can see where it's deteriorated. But its primary function is to get the water out of Nags Head Pond.
And can you give me some idea on the amount of water coming out of the pond? Is that?
Thank you.
Is it most of the pond water, storm water coming out of there? or-
All Nags Head Pond comes through that pipe. Also, the water off the west side of bypass from Adams Lane down South Beach Plaza, that area of the bypass, that also drains in it. Also, the bypass from Baltic Street, on the east side of bypass from Baltic Street all the way down to Dirty Dicks, all of that water also goes into that pipe and out the outfall.
Thank you.
So, just one more thing. So you're saying that this is a very good solution to Nags Head Pond, Ralph, but what did I hear you say about Gallery Row? It's not going to impact negatively on them, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. It won't impact negatively on Gallery Row area. What will happen is eventually, if that pipe collapses, everything from Nags Head Pond and those two parts of the bypass have nowhere to go, can't flow out any other way. That's the only way it's got for that water to go out.
Okay.
So you're saying this is mostly public water actually coming off the bypass, or it's all coming off the roads?
Yeah, and for that one pipe, yes. You have Nags Head Pond, and then what's coming off of the right-of-ways of the bypass, 158. That's what mostly flows in through that pipe right now. And then it picks up, as it goes on through, it goes down between Morales Art Gallery and then out to Memorial Street, and that picks up what's coming off of Wrightsville Avenue into there, and then takes it out to the Red Drum outfall.
And I guess for these projects, are we maintaining some distinction between private water and public water? I mean, it feels like we've got more of an obligation for the public water, it would seem like, and the private water is not,
It pretty
Not as
much
much
picks
our
up, it pretty much picks up all of public water. I mean, it, a little, really, there's one catch basin in the middle that does pick up a little bit of water off of Dirty Dick's parking lot and some off of the offices there. It picks up some of that off of their parking lot, but that's it. For the most part, it's all public water.
Nags Head Pond, I've met with the property owners there, and I talked to you about a private project there. As you know, Nags Head Pond's privately owned. It's in their lots, it's in their deeds. What I need what I'm suggesting for the residents of Nags Head Pond, for the issues resulting solely with the pond, is that I think that the Property Owners Association needs to come forward with a proposal and with a plan. And they need to decide collectively, do they all want to do this? So that part I'm kind of working with the Property Owners Association before I continue on. The surveying the existing conditions of $770, that's making sure that the water in the swells of the right-of-way is flowing out to that pipe we just talked about, coming off of the streets and flowing out like it's supposed to make sure that from one end of the street to the other, the ditches, we have the fall that we need, and the ditches are dug as they should be, and the swells are the right, it's designing the right flow of water to come off of those right-of-ways.
Didn't we just do that? Didn't we just reinstall those swales a couple years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
I think the homeowners did a lot of,
Why not
The
homeowners did that?
swells that we did were down on the Oak Knoll Drive. This survey is being done on Waterside. At the time Nags Head Pond was constructed, that swell on Waterside Drive was only for retention. Back in 2010, when we had all that water, 2009, 2010, well, that swell filled up. It was full of water. It was also helping take some water out of Nags Head Acres. So basically what we did was we went and installed some culverts that would allow that water to get out and go into the ditches that were coming out of, also off of Oak Knoll, and to let that water, again, go underneath the bypass and out the Red Drum outfall. That swell, like I said, was only done to retain water. If we want to continue to make sure that it keeps flowing water, that's what this survey is going to show, is where do we have to take out, where do we have to regrade and stuff to try to get that water back from the end of Waterside Lane to make sure it flows and keeps flowing out all the way out to Oak Knoll Drive. That's what this survey will do.
so what you're saying is we've gone into this subdivision and changed the drainage plan,
Yes,
essentially.
yes, yes. Because basically, we seen a way to allow that water to get out and stop flooding some of the houses in there. And that was, the problem that they were having. So at that point, we did go in and we altered the drainage system, that it was the way it was designed.
did you not also say that this does, if you're correct there, that it also helps Nags Head Acres?
Helps
lower-
the houses that back up to Nags Head Pond and Nags Head Acres.
So how did we, when we went in and altered it, how did we know what to alter it to? Did the engineer look at it at that point?
The engineer looked at it, and basically what we did, and what we were trying to do was just alleviate the water that was being retained in that swell. Now, we want to convey water. We want to make sure that it's going to convey that water, all that water out of there. That was, I wasn't at the meeting with the manager, but that's what the citizens would like to see. Instead of water just ponding up in there, and when it gets to a certain height, some of it flow out, they would like for it all to convey out. And without having the grades in there, we won't know how to grade it to do that.
My only concern is that as you're talking about grading out, there's a big difference between a swale and a ditch.
We've learned that lesson.
And I don't want to see expectations that are unrealistic.
Well, and again, that's why, without the survey, we really can't tell them that, you know?
Just an educated guess.
We may do nothing after the survey, or may not be able to do anything effectively after the survey.
But shouldn't we have done the survey before we started messing with the system?
Again, it was, at that point, it was just to alleviate some of that water that was in there.
Are you talking about the adjustments we made recently?
No, it sounds like we changed the drainage system in
We did.
the pond. And we did it without doing a survey or anything to see what should be done. I'm leaping to some conclusions there, but
No, I mean,
And that was how many years ago?
4 years ago. Again, when we did it, it was just to release some of the water. It wasn't to convey all the water out of there. Now, they want to convey the water out of that swell.
I
And
guess
again, it may not be that it has to be graded down. Some of it may have to come up to do that.
So I guess my question is this the most important stormwater issue in the town? And are we going to do this for every neighborhood?
This is not the most important, and we're not going to do this in every neighborhood. There are problems in Nags Head Pond. There's not a problem in every single neighborhood, but this gives us the opportunity to make an adjustment and to make an improvement if we can.
And if it can help 2 neighborhoods for the price of $770 for you to determine what you need to be done, is that the issue here or not? I mean, to me, stormwater is the most important issue throughout town. Whether this is the most important one to the people who live in the pond or Nags Head Acres, they may certainly well feel like that. We need to be reaching out to every neighborhood that we have and correct the problems that we can as expediently as we can before we are inundated with 39 inches of rain again. So I don't know what we're debating on here. We can't go back 4 years ago and say, don't do swells from West Oak Knoll over to the other street. That's done. So
I think you're right in saying that every neighborhood is going to perceive their stormwater issues as being
Yes.
the most important ones. I think that's where we've got to come in and set priorities and say,
I think that's what he's trying to do with this, is to determine if he can help Nags Head Acres. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I'm getting. You're trying to correct a portion of Nags Head Acres and Nags Head Pond by doing this survey, which may not help their situation at all if it is deemed that they are as deep or as far as they're going to go. But without this expenditure, it's a good guess, like maybe you did 4 years ago?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yeah.
I'm hearing 2 different issues. Swales are meant to hold water until that filters down and goes in. What I've heard Ralph say is that the neighborhood wants all their water conveyed out. And I'm not sure that we can design systems that will convey all the water out of every neighborhood. Some of it's got to, at some point, even given groundwater levels, infiltrate down in. And I'm not sure we have enough money or enough areas to put it to convey all the water. I agree that we need to solve stormwater issues, but I think we have to be realistic about what our expectations are. Either,
I think you've got to be very cautious about unintended consequences, too. We're taking it out of somewhere where you've got a stormwater design, and we're conveying it somewhere else where it may cause a problem over there. I want us to be real cautious about taking on additional private stormwater responsibilities, is, I think, where I'm coming from.
I think I can address some of those issues. I think in looking at this, we're not trying to look at this at a micro level, but more a macro level, so we can determine what our upstream tributary areas are that are being either affected by this or impacting those downstream areas. We're also looking at those downstream areas to see if we've got adequate capacity to handle the additional stormwater that's being input into the system. So we're trying to look at this as a whole rather than on individual levels. So I think the biggest thing is looking at those 3 points of discharge, which are the ocean outfalls at Gallery Row, at Conch Street, and Curlew Street. Those are our 3 main carriers of stormwater runoff. Now, that's part of the focus that we're looking at in getting it from these local areas such as Nags Head Acres, Nags Head Pond, Vista Colony, seeing how we can go ahead and create or improve the existing routes or create alternate routes in order to go ahead and get it to those systems. In review of the existing main drainage ways for those outfalls, what we're seeing is some restrictions within those systems. For instance, along the bypass from Barn Street down to Villa Dunes Drive. Exactly what you see is a sawtooth effect. You see a very inefficient system that has restrictions built into it based upon the placement of culverts, vegetation, other impediments within the system that really don't allow that system to flow freely. So we're trying to consider that and look at these individual neighborhoods and then also look at modeling them so we can kind of predict what impacts we're going to have on these neighborhoods. What kind of level of service are we going to get? Are we going to treat a 2-year event? Are we going to treat a 25-year event? So we're trying to look at this as a whole rather than individually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Stay. Thanks for joining. Okay, next one. The Nags Head Acres. This, I think David can address these. Nags Head Acres and Vista Colony have kind of become one. We're waiting on, the one route we're looking at now is the west side of Vista Colony, trying to get the DWQ approval to continue to pump down that groundwater to help increase capacity. But while we're doing that, David's also looking at alternate systems, other methods, again, looking at it from a bigger picture of not making a knee-jerk reaction to a problem that exists now, but being able to do the most effective thing and tie other portions of town into this. Can you put the map up in Nags Head Acres? And what I want to get David to talk about is the alternate things that he's looking at a little bit. How much more can you get closer? That's good. Just scan up to that corner, southeast corner in Nags Head Acres. While everybody's watching and waiting. A little more.
Gotta come down some more.
Try and get down there. There you go, that's good. And David can explain this, where we have George Ansell's house right there. Right there? Mark Baylog's house is here, one of the first houses in Nags Head Acres, if I'm not mistaken, but there's a catch basin that runs here, catches here. I mean, the water comes down this way on Nags Head Acres, goes into a pipe underneath, then it flows out, down, and then across. So he's looking at other alternatives of being able to maybe replace that pipe. It's only a 15-inch pipe, and it probably needs to be bigger. And we're looking at how we might be able to increase the capacity of that pipe, and at the same time, maybe coming across and capturing that water, an alternate route, maybe a parallel pipe, and then going out to the bypass. And at the same time, David, if you'll talk about this, we're working on the pumping down the water to get this portion taken care of. This portion is what you've designed, what you've approved in this year's budget is continuing to take this pipe on down to Blue Jay and then out to the DOT right away. David's looking at maybe not extending it that far, but possibly getting to Barnes Street and then making the turn there. He's actually got a couple of alternates. Hopefully I've set you up well enough to.
Yes, thank you. Okay. As part of the review that I did for Vista Colony, I also looked at the impacts on Nags Head Acres. And basically what I did was I took this portion right here, which I determined as being the contributing drainage area that was all going through this existing pipe that discharges out to the bypass. I think the original intent of the installation of that pipe was actually to serve these 3 residents. Am I correct about that? So it was something that was done at the time to go ahead and serve 3 individual properties. Well, now you're probably looking at somewhere in the magnitude of 25 to 30 properties that you're serving with a pipe that's not adequate to go ahead and carry stormwater runoff from those properties. Additionally, the other impediment that we have with that is that we've got a cross culvert pipe out here at the bypass. The elevation of that cross culvert pipe is 18 inches higher than the one that's discharging into the ditch. So basically what happens is the ditch in the bypass system has to fill up before it can even enter that cross culvert pipe. It's very inefficient, but it was something that was done at the time that was a workable solution. As it currently stands, probably not workable now, because what you're seeing is, especially during minor storm events, you're seeing stormwater collect, and you have localized flooding in this area right here. And basically what that is that's backwater because of the fact you have a small pipe, all the water can't fit within that pipe, and then if it can, it doesn't have the ability to go ahead and get up to the elevation to be able to cross the bypass and get out to the Gallery Row ocean outfall. So we've got a lot of existing restrictions built into that system. So there's a couple ways that we can approach that. One is to go ahead and improve on the existing system. Right now, that existing pipe network sits on private property, so easements would have to be acquired if they're not already currently in place in order to achieve that. The other thing that we can look at is having alternate routes. Alternate routes which would also have to be on private property, but those who have been impacted the most, especially in this area, may be amenable to going ahead and providing that. We've looked at a couple different construction methods in order to achieve that. One is conventional methods, which typically consist of open trench to go ahead and install a pipe network. The other one would be horizontal directional drilling, which would have less impact on the private property owners, but is typically more expensive in order to go ahead and achieve that. But essentially what we're trying to do is upsize the pipes in that system, provide alternate routing in order for that water to get out to the bypass system faster, and also look at the impacts that it would have downstream within that bypass ditch system to ensure that those neighborhoods that are on that downstream reach, that they won't be impacted by it. Another thing that we came across in the review is that with the three main drainage basins that we currently have, there's only one way of water getting into those systems and water getting out. So for Gallery Row, we've got 2 points of introduction, one from Nags Head Acres and then one from Nags Head Pond, and it can only travel one route in order to be able to get to the eventual discharge point. For Curlew Street, we've got basically a whole network that goes and is channeled into one location. Same thing with Conch Street. So one of the things that we're looking at, and with this proposal, or one of the things that we're investigating for Nags Head Acres, is one, how can we go ahead and connect those systems together? And some of them are pretty easy to remedy. For instance, there's a point up there in front of the Employment Securities Commission where there's not a cross-culvert pipe. Once you go ahead and put in a cross-culvert pipe at that driveway, you eventually connect the northern and southern portions of that Gallery Row ocean outfall. Additionally, if you go ahead and put a culvert pipe under Barnes Street, you then go ahead and connect the Gallery Row and the Conch Street ocean outfall. So, as Cliff had indicated, if one is overloaded, there's a restriction in one, it has another alternate route. And there's also the ability at Curlew Street, because there's a cross-culvert pipe across the bypass, that can go ahead and connect Conch Street and Curlew Street. So you basically have those three main drainage areas that are all interconnected, that can all equalize and be more efficient than the way that they are currently acting.
What I understood from one of the last conversations about Vista Colony and Nags Head Acres was that was part of the plan for extending that pipe down to Blue Jay, was it would take some of that water from the water that's backing up there at that Nags Head Acres, the 18-inch elevation piece, and take it down to Curlew. Did I hear that correctly? And there was talk about the elevation, there was a significant elevation difference between, I think it was Curlew and there, so you had the fall, it was a long run, but you had enough fall to get it down there.
We're still looking at that, maybe shortening up that route. Instead of taking it all the way down Blue Jay and out, we can take it to Barnes Street and then put a cross culvert there at Barnes Street. So we're accomplishing two things. We're shortening the path from Nags Head Acres and Vista Colony on the eastern portion, routing it out to the bypass ditch, which has the largest capacity of the entire network. And then secondly, going ahead and tying Gallery Row and Conch Street ocean outfall together.
Now, will those run either way?
With some grading and some additional pipe installations and adjustments at some of those cross driveway culvert pipes, yes, they could run in either direction.
Any downside, any unintended consequences?
Some of the things that we're looking at is building in some mechanisms into some of these drainage pipes to ensure we don't have backflows into these neighborhoods. We can put in some inline flap gates. So whenever we have these pipes that are leading into the bypass system, that water from that bypass system is not going to backflow and create a problem for those individual neighborhoods. So we're looking at that too.
Because originally, that's what I understood the purpose of that 18-inch difference in elevation was, so that you didn't have water flowing the wrong way, back across. Okay.
Yeah, in reviewing the bypass system from Barnes Street all the way down to a point south of Villa Dunes Drive, it's essentially flat. So you got, I think it's almost a 3/4 mile span where it's flat. That elevation is about 7 feet. Then from that point down to the cross culvert pipe that goes out to Conch Street, there's almost a 5-foot fall at that point. So you have, it's mainly level on the upper portion of town and then basically kind of falls off. pretty dramatically there in the downstream reach.
At this time, these are estimates of probable costs, so there's really nothing that I'm continuing to spend here. David's still trying to come up with the best solution here. So I think he's covered this one and possibly the next one. He covered that one. And these are cost in the $30,000 to $40,000 range. And this is the Vista Colony while we're waiting on DWQ approval for the existing plan. Can you explain these?
Sure. Basically, what we've got is a backup plan. There's the primary plan is to go ahead and put in a groundwater lowering system. Don't have full comfort level as to the permitting associated with that. Initial indications indicate that, yes, that is permitted, but the town wants to have a backup plan. So a part of that backup plan is going ahead and looking at a secondary containment area in front of Colony Ridge. And there's 3 different options that I've given for this. One is a gravity connection pipe. One is a temporary pump setup system that can be used on an as-need basis. And one is for a permanent pump to go ahead and pump from the existing containment area to the other area that we've identified there in front of Colony Ridge that can be used as far as stormwater storage. This, based upon the communications that we've had with Diener and DWQ, this is something that does not need to be permitted, but we would go ahead and provide them information to document and give them justification as to why we are doing this.
One of the issues we're having, and something new that DWQ is doing, is that they're not making decisions independent of regions, so that if Washington office is making a review, Raleigh and Wilmington are weighing in on those because they want to be consistent throughout the state. So not only is our permit being reviewed by this project being reviewed by Washington, it's also being reviewed for comment from Raleigh and Wilmington. So that's adding some delay. Okay, next. Northridge, tomorrow night, I'm going to sit down with the property and owners, residents of Northridge, to discuss, to listen to them as a neighborhood, their problems and their issues and their concerns, and talk to them about some possible scenarios that we can do, talk to them about the limitations that we have, try and explain that it's DWQ does not look favorably on collecting new water and sending it to outfalls. There's a lot of hurdles and problems, but I'm meeting with them just as a information gathering session. We got a map of their neighborhood that we can look at the individual problems and issues and then see what we might be able to do. And also to explain to them about swales and ditches so we don't go through a surprise. Let's see, next. Old Nags Head Place. This is an expenditure that we're looking at with David is first, it's all there, surveying and mapping the hydraulic model preparation. Dave is very aware of the fact that we may solve one problem but create another. So while sometimes I'm anxious to get things done, he reels me back in and says, Mayor, addresses the concern that you have, is that you don't want the unintended consequence, and you need to see the downflow and where this water is going, and is it capable of handling the water? So there is no stormwater plan for Old Nags Head Place. There is no system of really conveying the water there, except for the property that's on the west side of Memorial. It does outflow through the Curlew outflow, but the only stormwater measurement on the rest of the property is strictly infiltration. We've talked about the issues at the low point of Linda Lane, where all that water collects. It's been pumped down, and in 24 hours it's right back with no rain. But we're looking at Old Nags Head Place as a whole. This is the cost of moving forward with trying to come up with a recommendation. If There is one. And we have looked at this. We've gone back to see if there was a stormwater permit that the property owners were holding a permit of, and they were responsible for returning any possible swells, and DWQ was willing to, with our support, to be able to kind of put some pressure on the neighborhood association to return these swells. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So we are not trying to fix every problem. We're trying to find out who's responsible for fixing it and get them to fix it first. But again, that's Nags Head, old Nags Head Place. Soundside Road, we kind of came up with nothing. That was probably where DWQ was the most definitive, is that you're not putting water in the sound. And we know of no other, especially at the very end of Soundside Road, where to send that, or the middle, excuse me, to be able to send that water. That may be a problem that we incur for years to come. We may be stuck with that one. I think the next one is on Deering Street around Southridge. Same thing, the water, we can widen. I'm not recommending this one because we can widen the swells, try and increase capacity without going deeper to make ditches to convey the water further down towards the sound. We can do that. We can't put it in the sound. So we can try and help it along, and we don't need a survey or anything to do that. That's another area that we may be stuck with. The truthful answer may be that there's very little that we can do about that problem, at least so far. Seven Sisters, I'm going to ask you Seven Sisters and Dune Ridge are kind of tied together, but obviously Seven Sisters has been underwater from one end of the loop to the other quite a bit.
I think what we've found out recently is that on the cross driveway culvert pipe at the rear of the Children's Workshop Island Acupuncture, am I correct about that, Ralph? That both of them, that both of those driveway culverts are undersized, and that could be a point of restriction from providing some relief for the Seven Sisters subdivision. As it stands right now, Saga is looking at Moongate subdivision and developing within that, and also making improvements to that ditch along NC 12. So there may be some kind of buy-in that could assist the town, that if they improve the downstream area that they're focusing on, maybe they could make improvements upstream that will go ahead and provide some relief to Seven Sisters.
How did we end up with a 15-inch culvert there? How did those specs get in place, and who? I mean, I understand when Vista Colony doesn't have appropriate infrastructure. It's harder to understand when it's more recent development.
The 15-inch diameter is the minimum DOT standard, and they would have required driveway permits through DOT at that point in time. So I'm sure that at that point, that's what they referenced, was that minimum standard, rather than looking at the upstream area that was also contributing to that system.
And again, I don't know that it was done, it might have been done during the dry period, and we weren't looking at the bigger pictures David described as how can we fix one problem, how can we fix several problems at once? And I am assuming that that wasn't part of the approval of that 15-inch diameter, which was the minimum that the developer had to put in, and so that's how it got approved.
And it gets approved by the state and not the town? Does the town have any say-so on that?
The town does. And at that point, I believe that would have been reviewed in technical review.
I'm very reluctant that, I think you all know the ditch that I'm talking about, that on the west side of the beach road and where Moongate is, it holds a tremendous amount of water. I am very reluctant to pipe that ditch in unless it's very clear and very obvious that it's that they can continue to maintain that capacity of water there with piping it in and having some downstream or upstream effect, positive effect. But we're waiting for them to come forward. We've told them not to come forward. This is a horrible time to ask us to pipe in a ditch, but maybe they're thinking outside of their box. So.
And I guess follow-up question, should we be looking at our own minimum standards for a culvert or somehow, because anybody can come along, anybody that develops a piece of property, they can block it up by putting the minimum size required, right?
I think that's part of what we're looking at getting a better handle on what the existing infrastructure is. And in the course of going ahead and putting together a town-wide base map. So we have points of reference that we can refer to upstream and downstream into not only adequately size these pipes, but also put them in the right location.
Okay. And I've discussed this, spending $1,100 to get that private project put together. Here's what I'm asking, here's what I'm moving forward from this meeting on. Here's the $2,200 that we're looking at the culvert between Dirty Dicks and Nags Head Realty, $770 for seeing what improvements can be made at Nags Head Pond. Old Nags Head Place, $5,900 for surveying and design, and then the $1,100 to do the private property standard. I don't have any other expenditures other than, but I will probably, I definitely will until you tell me to stop.
How much is Old Nags Head Place?
$5,900.
$5,900.
And if you would like some justification for that, here's the guy that came up with the figure.
What happened to the engineer on that deal?
That was consent agenda.
Initially, that proposal was for a pump system. Once you go ahead and introduce mechanical means to that, the price essentially goes up.
Okay.
There may be some alternate ways of going ahead and looking at that. And we may be able to go ahead and gravity flow that, which means that that expense would come down and that price would be adjusted accordingly. We're also looking at not only sizing it based upon current conditions, but also future conditions for integration for future connectivity, because that's not the only place there in Old Nags Head Place that has localized flooding. There's also areas upstream, so we want to make sure that if we do it right. We only have to do it once.
Is the solution still looking at piping that to the bypass system? Going between two lots at that low place?
There are some pros and cons of doing that. That's the shortest route. I think that there are some easements that need to be acquired for that. The problem is to be able to gravity flow it. I think that the elevation at the edge of pavement there in the cul-de-sac at Linda Lane is a 5.9. The elevation of the cross culvert pipe there at the bypass is a 5.5. So there's not a whole lot of elevation difference. You got less than half a foot to get it out there. Then you also have the potential to introduce backflow into that system. I think the easiest course of action, and it would be more encompassing, is to go ahead and take it down Linda Lane and over to Curlew Street. We could do that with perforated pipe that would not only have conveyance, but also groundwater lowering effect. And that could go ahead and not only serve the cul-de-sac, but also as you proceed northward on that street.
So you're taking it back north?
Taking it back north and then east over to Curlew Street to the outfall. And we'll have to determine whether we've got adequate fall in order to achieve that.
You only got, from what you told me, you only got 4 or 5 inches to deal with.
That's if we take it out to the bypass. If we take it this other route, I believe we've got somewhere between 2 feet that we can work with as far as grading that with that flow line.
Question.
For the manager, are you asking us to approve this expenditures, or are you gonna bring it back to us in a board package so we'll see it in writing, or
No, these aren't,
do you already have the money that you?
yes.
So you're gonna go ahead and use stormwater money?
The money is,
Are you taking money away from projects that are already
Yes.
earmarked?
yeah, the $150,000 that was earmarked to do Phase 2 of Nags Head Acres and Vista Colony that I mentioned. If I continue on this path, then that's gonna diminish that money, and I'll, at some point, have to come back. Now,
Shouldn't you come back to us with forgive me, but if you're taking from Peter to pay Paul from projects that we approved during the budget process, shouldn't you be coming forward with these as additional projects rather than taking away from money that was already budgeted for specific items during the budget?
I completely understand what you're saying, but I'm treating this as a different occurrence, something that none of us foresaw, and I'm trying to move forward as expeditiously as possible to address some of the obvious concerns that we have in town. If I were to, in order to only do what was budgeted, that $150,000 and then $50,000 in contracted services, everything else would be put on hold.
And I'm not arguing that point. What I'm saying is if you want additional funds, from my point of view, you should bring it forward to us in a budget adjustment and let us decide where the money's going to come from and fund it, rather than taking away from a project that we've committed to, knowing that you're going to come back with something that you're going to need the money back.
And I guess that's a consequence of maybe the desire to be expeditious, but physically open and responsible and sharing, the progress of what we've gone. What I told you I would do from the last meeting was come back and give you the update and the progress. Now,
And that would have been great if it'd been in our packet.
Well, it's, a lot of this is happening daily, and I wanted to be able to work up until tonight and present you these figures. If I put it in the packet, then you would have only gotten what I had worked up until, this is evolving every minute of the day and every hour of the day. And I realize this is difficult because it's a different progress or different process than you're accustomed to. But it's a immediate and pretty severe issue that I'm trying to address as open and honestly, and while being responsible and laying it out for you as best I possibly can, and continuing to proceed.
Cliff, this totals, I missed the amount, I think it's less than 10,000, is that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and does Kim have a figure as of this evening that is in the stormwater fund, the line item?
We basically took the funding that was available at the end of last year. There may be an additional $10,000 that isn't spoken for, but the majority of what we have available is budgeted in one way or another in the current year's adopted budget. So you've got the money that's budgeted in contracted services currently designated for Nags Head Acres that could be used for something else. Alternatively, if you want to do both, that project and what Cliff's proposing, then it's going to require funding coming from somewhere, either water fund, general fund, somewhere else other than stormwater.
So this 10,000 would not come from stormwater unless we removed it from like Renee said, a project that is already earmarked for this money?
Yeah, we basically budgeted $200,000 for contracted services within stormwater. Of that, $150,000 was estimated as the cost of Nags Head Acres improvements without any, it's not been formally designed, not been formally contracted out, not bid. That was just an estimate, leaving $50,000 that could be used for other things. We've pretty much encumbered or spent most of that $50,000 to date.
Okay.
I think we are going to need to see it in writing in the packet before we think our rules of procedure are going to dictate that. But I guess what I'm cautious about is we've identified the Vista Colony and the Nags Head Acres project as being, this is something we want to fund, and it seems like we're kind of putting these ahead of that. Am I saying that the wrong way, or?
I think you're doing it along with.
I guess I'm trying to address all the issues in town, and not putting anything on hold while we concentrate on a problem we've been discussing for 2 or 3 years. They can, in my view, they could run parallel. There are problems and issues that need to be addressed. I'm not asking you to, I can come back. I'm trying to give you the progress and bring you up to date on what I've discovered and how I think some of the possible remedies for fixing these. I'm not arguing that I need to spend money tomorrow. I will bring all this back in a packet at the first meeting in October. But I guess what I'm asking for tonight is, have I identified the priorities that you feel are priorities in the town? Am I going in a direction that I shouldn't be as far as addressing some of these issues and problems? Have I identified things that aren't problems in your mind? And I guess that's what I'm looking for tonight.
I think you've identified a lot of the problems. I think David just pointed out one of the questions I had, which is you identified a solution, but it requires possible easements. And if you don't get those easements, what happens to your solution? And what does that do to all the rest of the system that you've identified of how it flows?
If we don't get the easements, then we can't do that portion of the project,
But how
whatever
would
it may
that
be.
impact all the rest of the project?
Well,
If everything's tying together?
I think you've really broadened the scope of all the stormwater. I know we've had tons of stormwater issues this summer, but I think we are stepping out into a much broader range of solving problems, and one of those problem areas is Old Nags Head Place that are not, they're not necessarily town problems. Not all stormwater problems are town problems.
And I guess that's what I'm looking for. If I'm getting too far out of, if I'm trying to do too much, or I'm taking problems that aren't the town's, then
I think we've got to do a better job of prioritization on public waters, public stormwater problems, when we've got to address those before we start addressing private stormwater problems.
I don't see.
Okay.
that he's brought up
But that's my opinion, that's not necessarily the board's opinion.
We cannot solve and should
I just
solve.
have a question. Help me make sure I'm understanding correctly. The Vista Colony project may change from what was originally planned. It's already changed from
the
what's
Vista Colony
originally planned.
project,
The
is-
additional work.
right, yes. If, one of the things when you have as much rain as we've had, the problems that occur, we didn't anticipate. We didn't anticipate water being in places that it's been, so it's allowed us to look at an alternative that can fix more than one problem. And we weren't, when we brought you the proposal of just simply that what you budgeted to run the water to Blue Jay, we weren't considering the problems that we've recognized since May.
So phase 2 may change, and then also you've identified perhaps an alternate solution in Nags Head Acres,
Correct.
which requires the easements. So kind of look at it as all that can possibly change, so,
I think, I like the idea of tying all the outfalls together. I think
I like
that's
that
real
too.
important. I think the idea of coming along 158 and making that, instead of a series of bumps, leveling that out or changing the flow of it, perhaps. But I like the big picture, but I like to see all the numbers, how they fit in the big picture. Because it's going to be hard if we start saying, okay, we can fund this, but we can't fund that, we can fund this, but we can't fund that, if we don't see how the whole picture ties together as a cost.
And there's a reasonable chance that you'll get some improvement by some of the actions that you've taken, and then may not have to do future actions. I mean, you could solve some of your problems.
What problems have we solved?
I think you've got the possibility, if you tied that,
No, I'm talking about, you said the problems that we've solved. I mean, I'd like to hear, Bob, what stormwater problems have we already solved? And
I
then
said some of the incremental things that we do. I think you've got to do some of these things and then see what results you get before you start doing
If we-
all of them.
if we don't give the manager the approval to begin, I think we'll be discussing this next year. So what is it that we need to satisfy our procedures so that he could get busy on the actual work?
We need it in writing in front of us in our package so that we've got time, so it's not coming just tonight on the screen in front of us.
So then
is
when we
what I
get
would
that
do.
in the package in 2 weeks, we can then
But-
incrementally strike off the ones that we feel personally are not the town's responsibility to solve.
I'd really
or-
like to see the manager do a little bit better job on prioritization and which ones are public water issues and which ones are private water issues. And make the commitment that we're going to prioritize the public water issues before the private water issues. I don't see going back in and changing Nags Head Pond's drainage, changing it from swales to conveyance as being the top priority in what we're trying to do. And I think we need to understand that we can't do everything at once because we really don't have the funds to do everything at
Well,
once.
I think we do. It's just a matter, are we willing to dip into the fund balance we have to solve these problems? But we can discuss each individual solution that you bring when you bring it. I kind of disagree with the mayor about the Nags Head Pond solution, since this water is being conveyed and is going out, and that's helping. But anyway, so, okay. Cliff, do you have clear direction from the board so we can,
I'm putting this
Move
in next
along.
month's packet.
Sorry, Commissioner Walters?
You know, I think everybody's sort of saying the same thing, but maybe in a different way. If we, you know, you're working on a master plan, it appears, so if we just get that prioritized and what's going to alleviate the most serious problem first, where do we get the most bang for our buck, so to speak? What's the most critical place we need to start, and just get that in some kind of priority form with the associated initial cost and potential longer-term costs.
Well, I think we've already started that. I think that the Nags Head Acres Vista Colony project was, and then we shot ourselves in the foot by just doing it. I mean, that's exactly what we did, because you've created hate and discontent in those two areas, and until we can get that straightened out, you know, the heck with the master plan as far as I'm concerned. We need to get those areas, the pond, Nags Head Acres, Vista Colony situation straightened out. And like Renee said, there's a difference between ditches and swales. I'm going to propose that we start closing in these ditches and put pipes in them and close them over.
You mean in the neighborhoods?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think
Because
that- I
they
think
look
that's-
absolutely terrible. I applaud the work that the town has done, because I think that what they've done so far has worked. However, I don't like the ditches, and a lot of other people don't like the ditches,
I
too.
don't think any of us expected ditches.
No.
You know, so,
I think that's what we approved. I don't think
well,
any of us expected it.
you had to be able to move the water some kind of way, and people, whether they agree or disagree, you know, now that we've done it, we need to correct that. That's gonna cost us some extra money, I would imagine. I'm not sure, because my recommendation is somehow or another we close in those ditches with, put pipes in them and close them in, or close it up, whatever they do, whatever the engineer decides to do. Even if we gotta pump them out of there, I don't care. Something needs to be done. That project, those three projects right away, those are the priorities right away. Then come back with the rest of the areas that Nags Head are drowning, and we'll work on those.
Before we
And-
create chaos and discontent, I agree with you totally, Commissioner O'Malley. Finish one before you create and go into other neighborhoods and
there's-
have the same worry and discontent.
there is something, though, to be said, and correct me if I'm wrong, When I met with you all out there at Vista Colony, it's my understanding that you can't just pipe any old ditch that town wants to do, that some of that has to be approved by, Ralph's shaking his head, yes, Ralph, by another agency other than us, so we can't just go out there and pipe the whole, everything that we've made a ditch.
Oh, I understand that.
And number two, a lot of this, again, takes DWQ approval, and they're not someone that writes you a letter this week. That's one of the reasons, Doug, that we've been so slow on fixing pretty what we dug. And I've got to say this, as bad as it looks, I do honestly wonder what would have happened with the last rain if those ditches hadn't been dug. How much water would be in the houses rather than in the ditches. So,
Well,
no,
I
it
just got-
isn't pretty.
I just got finished saying that. That
Just
has
saying,
worked.
but it cannot just be fixed without the proper authorization, and it's not us, it's not the town.
And I don't know that we're fixing it as much as we're trying, I don't know that it was done wrong. I don't know that the project was done wrong. It's just that the project wasn't done to handle the amount of rain that we've had since May.
The people out there feel that it was done incorrectly. I don't feel that way. I said I applaud you for the work that was done because you've moved the water. You moved the water out of Nags Head Acres, but in the meantime, you've pissed the people off doing it. So, you know, you're never gonna satisfy everybody, and I understand that. What I'm saying is we get through the projects, and I said I'm gonna come back and recommend that we put pipes in them. I didn't say that we could automatically do it, the town could automatically do it. I understand that. If we can't, we can't. But we need to do everything we can to correct and finish the projects that we're in, get those done before we move on to anything else. I'm done.
And I just want to make it clear, Vista Colony and Nags Head Acres are the town's #1 priority. No doubt about it.
You better put the pond right behind it, or what did you said, Nags Head Acres and what? Vista
And
Colony?
Vista Colony are
Yeah,
the
you better throw the
#1
pond in there,
priority.
too. They'll be throwing stuff in your yard.
Anything else on this, sir?
No.
Again, I want to say that Ralph and his crew and the manager and everybody, they have done a great job because it's worked. It's worked in Nags Head Acres. It's worked where the water used to be, you know, you could count it in feet. It's not that deep anymore. And in some places, it's not even across the road. So I'm a happy guy, but not everybody's happy.
And there are trade-offs in all these things.
That's
so
right.
there's-
And I don't know and you mentioned public water versus private water, whatever it was that you said. You know, I don't know that there's a difference. The water comes up, the water goes down. It's going to all go away eventually as soon as it stops raining.
I just want us to keep moving forward. That's the goal, is to keep moving forward, even if it's one project at a time.
And I appreciate, I'm, obviously you can tell I'm ready to take David after y'all are gone and keep going and moving forward. But I understand and appreciate the need to make sure we're doing it with the process.
Well, I just hope by us not being able to give you approval of that expenditure tonight, that you all don't stop what you're doing, so that when we do officially approve what I was ready to do tonight, that you are not 2 more weeks behind in your work, Cliff.
It'll probably rain tonight.
It'll probably rain the next 2 weeks. I certainly hope not, because it's not my fault that I stopped you.
Anything else under your agenda, sir?
God, I hope not.
Commissioner's agenda? Commissioner Rao, Mayor Pro Tem?
I have,
Big project.
there's a channel, why do I keep calling it Channel 20? It's GovEd TV meeting tomorrow evening. I'm going to be out of town. Roberta will attend by behest, at my behest, and she has all the information necessary to carry on. Other than that, that's all I have.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Walter? You don't want to mention that big seafood poster over there?
Well, I thought everybody could see that. You know, we're just a little over a month out, so
That's evidently going to be quite an event.
it is going to be quite an event. Pray for good weather.
And that's October 20th from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Two things. One is to remind everybody that Spencer Rogers is going to be here on October the 8th at First Flight High School to talk about, in layman's terms, sea level rise. He's going to have a presentation to come up, invite everybody to come out and listen to the presentation, ask questions. Spencer is just a down-to-earth guy and can explain it better than anybody I know because he does it real simply and he doesn't talk about 39 inches or any of that kind of terminology.
What time was that at First Flight High School?
First Flight High School on October the 8th, and I believe it's 7, no, it's 5. 5:30, thank you, 5:30. And the other is, there were 2 public hearings on 9/11 about the ocean erosion rates, the new maps. One was held in Currituck at the Wildlife Center, had about 10 people there. Staff discussed the new maps, explained it. Excuse me. The questions centered more on the rules that were adopted in 2009, not the new ocean erosion rates. Public hearing in Kill Devil Hills had 1.5 people there. One person there for the public hearing, one came right after the meeting ended. So it was very informal. That one, public hearing, was very informal. Since Willow Kelly was the one that spoke, and she and I had ridden to Currituck. She had heard the presentation, so she waived a lot of the reading. Dare County does have pretty much the most property affected by the new ocean erosion rates, specifically Rodanthe and South Nags Head. And then Currituck does up in the four-wheel drive territory, if I'm not mistaken. David Ryan was there at the Currituck hearing. Of course, we all know what we've had in South Nags Head, and we all know what's been happening in Rodanthe. So those rates were expected to be along those lines. And the question was, I've had some people ask me, why didn't the rates change after beach nourishment? Because you have to wait at least a 5-year period to determine that beach nourishment is stable. And you also have to have, over the long haul, a financial commitment to renourish the beaches, which we're working on. That's from commissioner point of view, but those were the 2 things for the CRC. At the last CRC meeting, which was the weekend before Labor Day, sandbags were on the agenda again. And they're now an 8-year permit, not a 5-year permit, and you don't get 2 bites at the apple.
Get what?
You don't get 2 bites at the apple. 8 years
Is that
is
8 years?
Yep. The question I still have is, what about all those that are due to still come out? And I didn't get an answer back, so that's all I have.
Mr. Sadler?
A question for Cliff. How about the fill that's needed there at Windmill Point for the Seafood Festival? I had one of the tourism board members ask me that today, and I thought that it was already on there.
It started. It's in the process now. I believe they started putting fill out there. We had a pre-construction meeting on Friday morning. RPC has that contract. I actually rode through the site before coming to this meeting, and they may have 20% of the fill on, maybe.
Yeah.
But it is in the works. It is in
Well,
progress.
I think that they're pretty slow, be on record, and I've got a tourism board meeting tomorrow morning in Duck at 9 o'clock, and I sure would have liked to have told them it was like 80% completed. So you're saying it's 20% completed?
That's my drive-through assessment. Now, once the stabilization for that is putting mulch on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall when they said this project would be done? Or when the drop dead date is?
For them to be done? No, I mean, this was handled through the Visitors Bureau and John DeLucia to get the fill on there. But they're gonna stay on it until they finish it, and once they finish putting the fill on it, they're also, my understanding, contracted to put the mulch on it also.
So it'll be stabilized the day they finish.
I need to make sure that the town doesn't get blamed for this because think it was our understanding that the town of Nags Head was going to oversee and get this project done. So I will report tomorrow that it's 20% done.
Now, do we have any responsibility on this? Because I'm not aware of it if we do. Are we in charge of this project?
The Tourist Bureau let the project with John DeLucia as the contractor who, or excuse me, the
Engineer.
engineer, and the contract went through John and the Tourist Bureau. Now, we're assisting in, you know, we were there for the pre-construction meeting, and we understand the urgency and the need to get this done for this event that's gonna be taking place. And you're right, the town probably will be blamed, so I want it to get done.
I don't want the seafood festival to, I'm not sure if this is going to be used for the parking area. I can't remember the site plan or whether it's to be used, what is it going to be used for, Cliff?
A little bit of both, primarily for parking.
With staging and parking. I just want it to be ready for it.
I understand.
But we're dealing with them like we would any developer, and we're talking to their agent, going through technical review. It's on John and the Tourist Bureau to get it done, right? Am I?
I think that, okay,
I think there may be something in that contract where it has to be completed by October 1st. I'm not sure, but Lee will know that.
I don't recall.
Yeah, I hadn't seen the
I
contract
think
call,
what we'll
but
do is, we'll, after the meeting tomorrow, get Cliff to get with the necessary parties and probably even you to make sure that it is going to be completed by the 1st of October.
And that meeting is tomorrow at 9?
Mm-hmm,
Okay.
yeah, okay. The only other thing I wanted to say is from the Nags Head Surf Fishing Club, thank the town of Nags Head for allowing the Nags Head Surf Fishing Tournament to have its 50-plus year tournament beginning October the 4th, which is Thursday, a week from tomorrow. Am I right? No, 2 weeks from tomorrow. And they're looking forward to a wonderful tournament with all that great beach out there.
Thank you, ma'am. The only thing I've got is that they did reschedule Beach Sweep. We had announced that it was going to be September the 29th,
29th.
and it got changed to October 27th.
Okay.
So it will go on just about a month later. Any other business to come before us tonight? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes. We're adjourned. I will never say anything about short meetings again.